Good evening. Welcome to the May 10th, 2021 meeting of the Westerville City School District Board of Education. To connect to this evening's meeting, please go to WCSOH.org/virtual BOE. And from that page, you'll be able to watch the meeting via live YouTube stream. Though providing an opportunity for public comment during school board meetings is not a requirement, the Westerville City School District Board of Education believes it's an important part of its engagement with and accountability to the community. As part of our mitigation efforts to slow the spread of the coronavirus, and in the spirit of maintaining an opportunity for our public to participate in these virtual school board meetings, we are offering interested persons an opportunity to submit written public comment. During a typical Westerville City School District Board of Education meeting, there are two opportunities for individuals to address the board. While functioning under this virtual meeting environment, the opportunity to submit public comment will open when the meeting begins at approximately 6 p.m. and close shortly after each public comment section is reached on the agenda. Per Board Policy 0169.1, each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 5 minutes in duration. When submitting your comments through the provided forms, we ask you to please keep your comments professional, avoid the use of inappropriate language, and refrain from identifying individuals by name in the event of a complaint. You may use the links provided on the district website to submit written comments for the board's consideration. All comments submitted become a matter of public record and are subject to release under Ohio law and the Federal Freedom of Information Act. As with in-person public comments made during a traditional school board meeting, members reserve the right to respond immediately or withhold comment in order to conduct appropriate research and follow up with the speaker at a later time. Thank you in advance for your understanding and your cooperation. And with that, Ms. Marshall, the meeting is called to order. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Altman?
Here.
Mrs. Davidson?
Here.
Mr. Velardo?
Here.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Here.
Mr. Bell?
Here. Agenda item 3.01, the pledge. Would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, agenda item 4.01, to temporarily suspend board policy PO 0169.1, public participation at Board of Education meetings. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. That motion carries. Agenda item 5.01, there are no district highlights or recognitions this evening. Agenda item 6.01, approval of the minutes of the Board of Education meeting held on Monday, April the 26th, 2021, as presented. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, additions, or corrections? Okay, hearing none, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes. That motion carries. Agenda item 7.01, an equity update. And with that, Dr. Kellogg, would you like to introduce this for us, please?
Thank you, President Bell, members of the board. It's my pleasure this evening to introduce Cynthia DeVise and Sherry Chapin from our Equity and Education Department. Before I do turn it over to them, I want to just share a little bit about our appreciation for their leadership this year. They have done an outstanding job of helping us consolidate and get more organized around our work. You're going to see some great outcomes this evening under their leadership, the training we've provided, and laying the groundwork as we go into next school year. So I just want to thank them publicly for that great work and for continuing their leadership, and let them have the floor to share with you a little bit about where we're at. So Cynthia and Sherry, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Dr. Kellogg. I appreciate that. So good evening to the Westerville City Schools Board, President Bell, Dr. Kellogg, Treasurer Ms. Marshall, and everyone who's listening in today. So thank you for this opportunity to share an update on our district equity work. So we're excited, myself and Sherry, to kind of share the things that we have done district-wide to this point. Thank you, Jill. Next slide. So first, our work this year, well, 2020, 2021, started with a call from Dr. Kellogg over the summer. So in June, I received a call because there was so much tension in our world and a lot of racial unrest about what do we need to do to get us on track to ensure that our students and our families understand that equity is important to us in our district. And so you already understand what happened at that point because you responded to our 10 equity targets. So the Racial Equity Task Force, which was made up of our educators in our district, came together. It was over 20 educators came together to begin to discuss some of the things that we were already working on and some of the things that we needed to do better and that we were missing and there were gaps. And so we began to work on what those tasks should be. And there were about 10 or 11. We submitted them with action steps, sent them to Dr. Kellogg for his review. And then from that point, he shared them with the board for their approval. And so with that came us to begin to do our work. One of the great things about sitting down with 20 plus educators is we realized that we were on target to meet some of these goals, but we still had some work to do. And so with that, we already had established building equity teams. So this was nothing that we needed to do new. We already had building equity teams established. And so we could put something within that framework because we had them established and we wanted to make sure that they were throughout the district. And so we ensured that every building had a building equity team. So that was something that we did during 2020. And then also we implemented the district equity team, which we already had that in our framework, but we needed to implement that. And we needed to make sure that both of those teams were fully staffed or we had full participation with not only our educators, but with community members and with students. And so we did that as well. Jill, if you can flip the slide, thank you. So this slide really just share who's on our team. And we, as I mentioned before, we had a building equity team and a district equity team. Both teams had separate functions, but we also knew that we were all working collaboratively to get to the same goal. And so these are some of the bullet point areas that we were working on during this year. And so I just wanted to kind of give you a brief overview of what some of those tasks were that we were working on. So to review building policies, practices, and data related to the 10 key equity targets. So in each building, they had their data in regards to achievement, discipline, attendance, whatever data they needed for their building equity team to make decisions, we made sure that they had access to that data. We identified building level priorities. What were some things that they really wanted to work on this year? And so we'll talk about that a little bit more as we move forward. 2-year building equity plans. So in regards to identifying the building level priorities, we asked them to create a 2-year building equity plan. And actually, Dr. Kellogg created and made this a goal so that every building administrator understood that equity was our goal. And we actually started the year off with equity as our theme. And that was a part of our Westerville Educators Day. So everyone received, we had a jump start on equity as our work for our district. And we asked everyone to begin in their equity teams on creating a 2-year building equity plan. Within that plan, they were to begin to think about outside of the box, what would you want to do? Maybe what was something that you thought about doing, but you didn't have the chance or the time to do it. So think outside the box, put that into your 2-year plan, and then begin to examine best practices on how to meet some of those goals in those action steps. Then we also are asking them to provide a progress update to the district equity team. And we'll talk to you a little bit more about how we were receiving the information that we needed so that our district equity team knows exactly what the building equity teams are doing. We created surveys and they shared information, not only through the 2-year equity plan, but also through a survey that we created. And we also are working towards what we're putting in their request for next year is to provide a summative report to the district equity team so that we are always working in sync with each other so that we know what one hand is doing and the other hand is doing. So for the district equity team, we're reviewing the districts. We're also looking at those 10 equity targets because that's kind of leading and guiding our work. Establish priorities for the district work so that whatever is happening in the buildings, then we know about it in our district teams, and we're also working so that we can help them reach their goals that they put into the 2-year plans. So once the building gives us their 2-year plans, then we've had the opportunity, we've already done this as a district team, and we began to look through those 2-year building plans to find out what are the themes that resonated throughout all of our buildings, and that's how we are supporting them on the district team, how we were supporting our buildings by looking at their 2-year building equity plans and seeing what are those themes that resonated and kind of rose to the top as collective through our district. We're updating the board and our community on what we feel are some of our focus areas and some of our outcomes. So we're doing that today, and we kind of continue to do that through the work that we're doing on our building teams and our district teams. We are currently reviewing the BET goals and their plans and their outcomes, and we're using the surveys and the 2-year plans that we mentioned earlier. So those are some things that we've been working on this year, and we're pretty pleased with our work. And so we'll kind of share a little bit more as we move through this presentation. Thanks, Jill. Sherry?
Good evening, everyone. So like Cynthia mentioned, we do have a district equity team, and this team is divided into 6 work groups. So some of our members are focusing on the academic and curriculum materials, so looking at our student achievement and then those resources that we are using to teach our children. We also have a group that is focusing on the budget process, looking to see how our funding can be used and distributed to make sure we have equitable education for all of our students. Another group is looking at family engagement. We want to make sure we are using best practices to make sure our families are involved and coming to the school, and even having some of the school go to the family so that we can make sure we're all on the same page working together. We have another group looking at human resources and professional development. So we are looking at some of our hiring practices and continuing to make sure all of our educators and all of our staff are those lifelong learners, learning about how we can make our schools more equitable. Another group is looking at student behavior and discipline, again, looking at some of our policies and seeing how we can reduce our discipline disparities that we are noticing. And then our last group is looking at student well-being. We have wonderful panorama data that helps us understand how our students are feeling at school. So this group is helping us define different ways we can make sure our students are feeling well when they are at school. So this group, we met and we wanted to get a better understanding of the equity work that was already happening in our schools. So we created a survey for each building to complete. And questions focusing on each work group's theme was added to the survey. You all have access to this PowerPoint or slideshow, and at the top of the slide, you will find a link where you can access those results. And later on, we'll give you a sneak peek of what some of those results did say. Jill, you can go ahead and change to the next slide, please. So we began by gathering information about the current equity work in the buildings with the surveys. So the next step was to determine our plans for moving forward. So with Dr. Kellogg's district goals, we had two main components focusing on equity work. The first one was to make sure that each building's equity team completed 5 sessions of the Be the Change Implicit Bias training. And to date, I'm happy to report that 100% of our BETs are on track to meet that goal. But the other part of the district goal was for each building to complete that 2-year equity action plan. And these plans, you will find goals focused on everything from academic achievement, professional development, sense of belonging for students and families, and much more. And this information can also be accessed using the link at the top of this slide. This information was given or done by both elementary and secondary buildings. So once buildings completed their plans, they were also reviewed by the DET with the intent to collaborate with the buildings to help them refine and ultimately achieve their goals. We are all about collaboration and making sure we are talking to one another because this is a whole district process. And based on the information from both the surveys and the action plans, the DET was able to determine some common themes throughout the district. So on our next slide, Cynthia is going to go into detail about some of those themes that we discovered through our work. You can change to the next slide. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry. So as she mentioned, our district equity team was divided into 7 work groups. And she mentioned what those work groups were broken into. So the first one was curriculum or academic and curriculum. And when we looked at the building, the 2-year building equity plans, the one thing that resonated throughout K-12 was that they wanted to provide more diverse curriculum and materials. And so that is the theme that resonated throughout. And so that particular work group will begin its work with those buildings. In addition, they are going to add to their team. We'll talk a little bit more about that, and be able to support all those buildings who wanted to increase their diversity in regards to curriculum and materials. And so now we're going to add people from our district and the community to begin to help support our buildings with this particular goal. Family engagement, within that work group, they wanted to look closer at what evidence-based family engagement models look like out there, and to begin to kind of better understand what is family engagement. Is it very different from family involvement? And what are we actually doing when we talk about family engagement? And so we're looking for best practices in the work of family engagement, and then helping our building teams best understand how to begin to engage our families more fully. HR and professional development. We know that we started our Be the Change professional development, the work through Ohio State University College of Education. So when they created this work for us, they did a pre and a post survey. And so we have the data from that. but that is specific to our building equity teams. And so our work moving forward is to use our building equity teams to lead that work with their staff buildings, the staff in the buildings. So that work will continue, as well as on our operations side. We have been working with operations and Scott Dorn's team, Carrie Dennis, to begin to talk about what is this going to look like for operations. And so we've met with the College of Education at OSU to begin to create some of that work so that we can provide that professional development for our full district. The other thing that we have worked on so far is creating diversity questions for interviewing processes. So we have worked with Steve Mazzy to create what those questions will look like. And so that we don't have to wait until the next year, those questions have already been created. There's been a rubric on how to begin to better understand the responses that they receive. And those things have already been pushed out to all of our building principals for use. Student behavior and discipline. One of the things that resonated within this particular work group was that we saw a lot of requests for a process and how to create restorative justice practices. And so we have a student behavior and discipline work team, and they've already been doing some of the work on researching best practices. And from our conversations, we know that some of this work was already done in a very minute way with Walnut Middle School. And so their assistant principal is on the team. So they're gathering research information, best practices, so that we can begin to look at that before we send this out to any particular building. We're going to look at the research, and then once we understand it, then we'll be able to kind of share out as we learn more. Student wellness, student well-being. One of the things that resonated throughout the district was to create a reporting system that any student or staff members can report any bias, any unjust instances, that once it's reported, then we know that there's follow through and follow up. That's something that was requested throughout. And then the final thing was under budget. And in our budget work group, we established that the majority of our buildings wanted to see equitable funds distributed throughout the district and to create a process in the rubric. Nicole Marshall is leading our budget work group. And so that team has really been working on a way to provide a rubric and how to create equitable and distribute equitably the funds that we have. And so that work, you can see some of that is in our in the 2-year plans in those requests. Next.
All righty. So as we move forward, I'm going to share some of our objectives that we are looking at moving into next year. We would definitely like to start by expanding our work group team. Cynthia mentioned that a little bit earlier. We want to gain more perspective. Right now, we have a wonderful dedicated group of people who are working with our district equity team, but we would love to add educators, students, and community members, even more, so that we can add that perspective and make sure that everyone's voice is being heard in those work groups. We're also very excited to offer the opportunity for some supplemental contracts to educators who would like to lead their building equity teams. So this request has already been approved by the WEA, and it will make its way to Dr. Kellogg's desk soon. Currently, we do have principals, instructional coaches, and some teachers who are participating in the train the trainer model in order to help facilitate the Be the Change trainings. They are currently leading their equity teams. They've also worked very hard to make sure that their buildings have their action plans, and even our DET surveys, that they are completed. So next year, there will be additional tasks and additional assignments that we will need to make sure that our equity work continues to move forward. So we would love to be able to compensate the wonderful individuals who are helping us with this work. We will have professional development provided for these individuals over the summer so that they will know exactly what their responsibilities are and have a great understanding of what that is for next year. Something else that we're looking at is working with their building. Again, these equity leaders will be working with their building to help complete and then submit a progress report in both November or December and in March or April, because we want to make sure that we are all sharing in that celebration as our buildings are moving toward achieving their action plan goals. So those equity leaders are going to be so important in our buildings. We're so excited about that. We also plan to extend our Be the Change training to our instruction and operations staff. So currently, all of our building equity teams are trained or will be trained by the end of the year in those 5 sessions in that Be the Change. So next year, moving forward, we want to make sure that not just the equity team members are trained, but all of our teachers are trained. And in addition to that, as Cynthia mentioned earlier, we are working with Scott Dorn and Carrie Dennis and that whole team to make sure that our operations staff is trained as well, because we want everyone to have this understanding of what implicit bias is and how that does impact our interactions with our students and with our families. So our final objective, as we were discussing earlier with our racial task force, we have those 10 targets because of the conversations that we had with this group of educators. So Dr. Kellogg, Cynthia, and myself, we all would like to meet with this task force this month so that we can share where we see our progress and even some of our ongoing needs, because we want to maintain that two-way communication as we are all working together toward becoming a more equitable school community. So as you can see, our goal is again to collaborate with all of our stakeholders in our district so that we can make sure Westerville truly is a place where everyone belongs. So we appreciate you listening. We would like to open it up now for any questions.
Any questions?
Well, I do have one. So thank you so much for that presentation and especially for the work. I really appreciate the update. And I guess my first question is one that maybe sounds simple, and maybe it is simple, but maybe it's not. So I'm just wondering if we have a single definition of equity that all the teams are working with, because I think equity is a fairly new word to a lot of people out in the world. And so I'm just wondering whether we're all sort of in agreement on what we mean by that.
Yes. So if you or if anyone wants to get a glossary of terms, because the other thing that we do in our training and then on our website is provide a glossary of terms. And so those terms, you can see a term about equity or equality. And when we think about, well, you probably didn't, but so we do have shared common language, which is very important for us. And so we put that on our website, and then we also share during our Be the Change training. But when I think of equity, if you want to know what I think of equity, I think of it as for me, it's not really about making sure that everyone has a textbook. We're making sure everyone has a textbook, right? But we also want to make sure that everyone sees themselves in the textbook, right? So when we think about equity, it's not only about providing everyone with resources, but we understand the importance of giving everybody exactly what they need. So you may need a textbook, but I may need a textbook also that shows some pictures of myself in there, the people that look like me, right? So we're going to make sure that when you're receiving education, that you get what you need, and in addition to what I need may be a little different than what you need, right? but we're all being fulfilled when we come to the classroom. So that's what I think about equity. So not so much about equality, but we're providing the need for each child as they come to our classroom.
Thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate that. And I think those are two terms that are a little slippery with each other sometimes, or maybe not so familiar the distinction between equality and equity. So I appreciate that. And then my other question was just, I'm wondering, how visible is this work so far to students in buildings? I'm thinking we're probably in a pretty quiet sort of behind the scenes, we're getting out everything lined up, getting the plans. But I'm just wondering, on the student side, I know we're recruiting for more members to these teams. Are there any students engaged yet, or are the opportunities growing there, I guess? Just how visible is the work to students so far?
That's a great question, right? So this is an area that Sherry and I have had conversations about moving forward. We knew that it was very important to begin our work with educators. And then as we move forward, we're looking to work more closely with our students. But we have this year had conversations with our building administrators to talk about how do we support them in making sure that our students understand the importance of this work that we're doing, about bias, about equality, about equity, right? About us all understanding the space that we're in. And then in addition to that, we've been having conversation for those students who have been marginalized. How do we provide space for them during this highly sensitive time that they're going through right now? So we've been having those conversations in regards to moving forward. And so what we have in plan right now is we are, the remainder of this month, we've scheduled times to meet with building principals and a core group of their student leaders to ask them what would they like to see moving forward. And so that is some of the work that we're doing now. So I'm meeting with secondary, and Sherry has been already having conversations with school counselors as well as building principals about how can we create space for students in this work in their buildings.
Great, thank you. I knew that was part of the work, just wondered where we were with it. So thanks for that, and making sure that students have an opportunity to join into the work too.
And I also must say that we do have students on our committees. So I guess I left that out. So we have students on the district equity team, and we also have students on the building equity teams.
I have a few questions I'd like to ask. Going back to some of the slides that you were showing, I'm wondering if you could flesh out for me a little bit on what you mean by providing more diverse curriculum. And what I'm looking for in this question is, how do you anticipate this meshing with the curricular processes that already exist? You're talking about curriculum in the buildings and working around curricular change in buildings and so forth, and that suggested to me that you may be thinking of some sort of different process. And I'm just wondering if you can fill me in a little bit about that.
Well, what we have in mind right now is we are bringing our curriculum team to the table. So our curriculum and materials work team is led by Barbara Wallace and Scott Reeves. And the folks that are in our curriculum team, Dr. Knapp, Cheryl, we've asked them to be a part of that particular work group so they can begin to unravel what some of these requests have been in those 2-year equity plans so that they can dive a little bit deeper into what's being asked in the buildings. So right now, I can't tell you specifically, but I do know that those have been requests throughout the 2-year plans. And so we are creating a team so they can do a deeper dive into what the requests are and how that will kind of merge in what we are already working with right now. So it could be additional books. I know a lot of books were requested in elementary. And so we know that we have some of our ethnic studies courses already in our high schools. but we wanted to go to the experts in their field and bring the curriculum team on board so that they can look at these 2-year plans and begin to take a deep dive on what's needed and what's requested.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. It's also a really good opportunity for people at the building level to get a better understanding of curriculum development. I think we all know that it's kind of like the definition of equity and equality. People think they know the definition of the word and what it means and how it happens. And yet when we really dig down, as you say, we find that people have different understandings of what that may be. So this is a good opportunity for people to really kind of dig into what it means to make curricular change, how that happens, and what all goes into that. So that's good to know. Another question I had about the slides was, how would the reporting system for unjust instances differ from our current reporting structures and processes?
Dr. Nestor Baker, I might pipe in on that one since it's policy related. And actually, if you look this evening, one of the policies you're going to pass or go back as a revision of that current policy. So what we've had an interest in understanding is we can go back to last summer with student voice that was presented through the Dear Westerville, and there was other school districts and those stories. I know through a thought exchange I did with students earlier this year about their experiences that came through again. And so what kept coming through was this piece about students experiencing student-on-student friction around issues of race and discrimination, oftentimes, and sometimes staff to student. But more importantly, I kept seeing a lot of student-on-student interaction, and students sense that reported, nothing happened, someone saw it, didn't do anything, or it was just under the radar and just within the student world that oftentimes is closeted away from adult eyes and ears, right? Social media, et cetera. And so what struck us is, as you see now, we have a policy that has a whole procedure in place of how to bring forward a complaint and how it's supposed to happen. It's very formalized, very bureaucratic. And I think the easy answer would be say, well, we just need to inform people about the policy. I think it's deeper than that. I think we need to look at how that can be done in a safe space with students and adults feeling comfort and trust in who they report to, and then how that's going to be dealt with. Right now, it has kind of a bureaucratic, up the chain feel to it, and so we've asked Tammy Santa and her group to take a look at that from a student perspective. Is how do we create these spaces where this can happen effectively and in a timely manner, right? Oftentimes, the stories we're told about unfair, unjust, racially motivated behavior, we get later, and so our opportunity to respond has evaporated. So want to look at how do we align the policy and guidelines we have with a process that people who need that relief can access effectively and get the relief that the policy calls for. Because right now we have people telling us this is happening, and I'm looking at a policy saying we have something here that's supposed to address that. Why aren't those two things aligned? And so that's the way we're envisioning it. And so not sure how it works yet. I think we want to bring people in and have them help us understand what's the best, safest way to do that. It's not much different than bullying behavior, which has some of the same elements to it, right? I don't want to report because it's just going to get worse, or nobody does anything. So they're very intrinsically linked, and I think both those systems of reporting could probably look differently than they do today.
Actually, you hit right on where my thinking was going around that. I'm looking at alignment between our policies and our practices. Same thing with curriculum. And I'm also looking at alignment between the issues we're talking about around equity this evening, but also around other issues that exist within the life of our students and our staff as well. So I'm looking at that alignment going forward. And the reason I asked the question is just making sure that that's where we're all going as we focus on that alignment piece. And it's kind of like I said about curriculum. it offers us an opportunity to explore what we do have and to identify better ways to make those policies and procedures work well together. So that's good. And the last thing, you talked about expanding, well, no, next, last question, then I have one comment. You talked about expanding the work group teams, and I think that's a great idea, and I'm really excited about that. And I'm wondering, what's your timeline thinking, just roughly, what are you thinking about doing? And have you given thought to how you might reach out to get other people engaged in those teams?
So right now we are, we've shared email messages to a lot of the community members. We have sent information out to organizations, for an example, like Otterbein, the We Rise group. We've sent information out to our business organizations just to let them know that we in Westerville have created an equity work teams, and we'd like to hear their voice and would be interested in individuals who would be willing to participate in our 7 work teams. So I've sent that information out to community members. We also have sent it out to our parent organizations, like our PTOs or our Black family organizations, so that if we have individuals from those organizations that would like to participate, they just need to email me, and I've already received some emails of folks who would like to participate. And so those work groups have met in the smaller teams, and I think our next meeting is around the 24th or the 21st of this month, and they're coming back to us to talk about how they would like to include individuals on their team, what they see their needs are, but we're looking at getting those teams up and running by the beginning of next academic year.
Good. Well, glad to hear that. Sometimes it's really hard in a district as large as ours to do the reach out across the many groups that exist in this particular community, and I'm glad to see you're making an effort to do that. And the only other thing I wanted to say, and Jen, I was really glad you asked that question because I was going to ask it too, so I was glad somebody else asked it first. The equity definition, it is so important that we all have an understanding, we being community, an understanding of what we mean when we're talking about equity and we're talking about equality, because those words not only are slippery in what they mean in a lot of places, but they can be hijacked in a lot of ways, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. But, I want to go a little bit beyond the definition, Cynthia, that you were giving, as strong as that was. I think that equity is more than seeing pictures that look like themselves for our students or stories that sound like them in our materials and so forth. I think it is for all of our students. It is receiving an educational delivery that meets students where their needs are, whatever those needs may be, and however those students see themselves and we see them. We need to be working together on all of those issues around equity of instructional delivery, because that is the way that we will boost not only our academic achievement for our students, but also our student well-being. It's just an extraordinarily important concept, and we need to make sure that we're thinking about it as regards meeting all of our students where they need to be met.
Thank you, and I would echo that, yes.
My thoughts, President Bell, actually would just mirror Dr. Kellogg. The board knows I'm one of the representatives on the district equity team for this year, and what Sherry and Cynthia have done to date with the district team has been really outstanding. And Jen, I appreciated you saying that, and Nancy, you picking it up. Is from the get-go, they laid out a kind of a route system. Cynthia and Sherry kind of laid out a route system. Here's what we're talking about, and you may even not agree with all of the definitions, but this is the one we're going with, so we can all be in the same place. And the Be the Change training is not only for the district, but for the building and for staff and so on. And I have found that to be just really, really encouraging. It's been a real blessing to be with I should say Miss DeVries and Miss Chafin and their roles in this regard. And I've just been very fortunate to be a part of it and look forward to the board being a part of it throughout the years coming. So my words really are just thank you to the both of you for the President Bell, the enormous amount of time that these two and folks around them have put in. Dr. Kellogg, I know you would concur, they have just put in just multiple hours on top of everything else. And it's not only a good thing that they're doing, but it's a right thing. So thank you to you all.
I would like to pick up where Mr. Velardo left off and piggyback on as I listened to your report this evening. One of the things that stood out to me was the volume of work that's necessary in order to accomplish the goals that have been established. So as I look at how much work is required, and as I think about it in my mind, I'm wondering if you could share with us if you think you have adequate staffing in order to accomplish our goals and objectives. Because when I think about one person being kind of overseeing this work and 15 elementary school buildings, and one person being responsible for it in 7 buildings, 4 middle schools and 3 high schools. How is that workload on the two of you? How is managing that?
Well, President Bell, since you asked, thank you for the question. I would first say that is the reason why we were requesting, and I would say just fortunate enough to have Sherry come over mid-year to do 2 days a week because it was an enormous lift. And I was asking, people from every department to pitch in to make sure that we can implement some of the, the task and to provide and to help facilitate the Be the Change. So if you ask me, how did it happen? It wasn't just Cynthia and it wasn't just Sherry. It was everyone from throughout the district. If you asked who were facilitators, I would have to say special ed facilitated, just everyone pitched in because we needed all hands on deck to make it happen. And so I was very fortunate to have people continue to say yes, 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 and yes again to make sure that the work happened. So I can't say that it definitely wasn't all me. And I was fortunate to get Sherry midway, and even more fortunate that she'll be coming on full time next school year. So those are some questions that we'll have to ask moving forward. The question was asked, when are we going to start working on the students piece? When are we going to start working on operations piece? So when are we going to train the full district? So those are all great questions. And so I can't put a time on it because you're looking at the team. So I would just say that the work is needed. The work is necessary. I can concur with Mr. Gallardo to say that people have given just awesome feedback in regards to the delivery of what we've done this year. People have said that it has been the best equity training that they have attended. So much dialogue and so much encouragement has been moving forward with our buildings who've been participating in the training. So all I have to say is that we may be moving slow because it's 2 people. But we know that the goal is there, it's large, and we're going to continue to work towards it. Yes, if the board gives us, the gold star to say we can add more people to the team, my golly, I would be jumping up and down saying, yes, when can we do it? When can we do it? And so, but we are patient, and we know that there is a lot of work to do, and you have 2 people. And so you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of work to do in a small and mighty team.
Okay. And because you don't have enough to do, can you share with us, is there, because I'm not sure, and I'm sure other members of the community don't know the answer to this either. Is there much collaboration across district lines? Do you have an opportunity to work with persons who have similar job duties and responsibilities as yours? Do you have an opportunity to connect and coordinate with them in other districts?
Yes. So monthly, we have a Central Ohio Collaborative. So individuals who do work similar to mine. So as you know, in 2020, there was a race for a lot of our school districts to do the work that we had already started 7 years ago, right? And so a lot of the school districts recently hired diversity directors, diversity educators to start their work. And so before that, we probably had 4 or 5 people. And now we have, a screen full of people who show up from Central Ohio and plus other areas. So we begin to have conversations about how we can help and support each other, which is great. But what I'm finding out is that the work that we are doing in Westerville is far beyond what other districts are doing or have done. And I'm doing a lot of teaching and sharing, and which is cool. I don't mind doing that. So we are much further ahead than a lot of the school districts, a lot of our peers. But we work and we move collaboratively, and we share resources, and I think that's awesome.
Okay. I can't thank you and Ms. Chafin, can't thank you enough for the work that you are doing in working with administration and leading this effort. So thank you both very, very much. I think I'd be on safe ground here to speak for not only myself, but the entire board, to let you know that you have our support in the work that you are doing. And so we stand ready to help in any way that we can. So thank you both very much.
Thank you. We appreciate being able to come. And I have hogged up all the questions and responses, so I'll let Sherry say something because she may want to answer or have something to say. But thank you very much. I appreciate being here with you today.
I just want to echo a thank you. Thank you so much for the support that you have given, and I'm sure you will continue to give on this very important work that we are doing. So I'm excited to continue on next year and just to keep working, moving forward. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you both. Moving on with our agenda for this evening. Agenda item 8.01, public comments. We have received no public comments at this time. Agenda item 9.01, financials. We don't have any financials to report this evening, so we are moving right along. Agenda item 10, the personnel consent agenda, that is comprised of agenda items 10.01 through 10.11. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Mazzy, would you like to share with us about this evening's personnel consent agenda?
Absolutely. Well, good evening, President Bell, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, Ms. Marshall. I'd like to present to you for your consideration the personnel consent agenda. As you can see, that many items contained within, for the most part, are through the normal course of daily business. However, I do believe there are some items that do deserve to be highlighted in the agenda. You'll see several classified resignations recently. Again, not really due to people, hightailing out of Westerville or anything like that. This is just due to we're finalizing a long sub list and cleaning up those lists as we go into the summer. You'll see a resolution regarding employee benefits. One-time payments, again, opportunities for our staff to have a positive impact on our students and our learning community. And then a particular item, so pleased to introduce and hopefully with your approval, welcome our Director of Safety and Security, Steve McElroy. Steve joins us from the Columbus Public Schools, where he has been an executive director. He is a versatile employee who has served in a myriad of roles for the Columbus Public Schools, including safety and security. Mr. McElroy has served as a subject matter expert for the U.S. Department of Education's Readiness and Emergency Management for Schools Technical Assistance Center. He's done that for many years. And also he serves as a trainer for the U.S. Department of Education's Training by Request program on developing high-quality emergency operation plans and assessments. So I think we're very lucky to, again, with your approval, to hopefully get on board to impact the Westerville City Schools. Be happy to answer any questions you might have at this time. That concludes the personnel consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion or questions?
Do we vote first, or should we let Mr. McElroy say something to us and then we decide if we're going to vote?
Well, Board President Bell, board members, Dr. Kellogg, I could just go on and on. Thank you for this opportunity to work with a phenomenal team. I really look forward to serving the students, staff, and community in Westerville. And I'll be there bright and early tomorrow morning, ready to get started.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for being with us and for becoming a part of the Westerville City School District team. So we certainly thank you and welcome you aboard.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Valero,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes. The motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 11, which is old business. May I have a motion to approve the final reading for policies 2260, policy 2260.01, and policy 2266.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mr. Valero,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes. That motion carries. Agenda item 12, new business. We have the first reading for two policies, policy 0142.3 and also policy 0148.01. And so, Dr. Nestor Baker, would you like to share with us about
Absolutely.
these?
I would be happy to do that, and we'll just take care of both of them at one time. These are the policies that came about based on our board development session that we had on, I believe, March the 1st. And as you'll recall during our discussion that evening, we talked about the history of liaison positions on this particular Board of Education and how those went back to the mid-1970s. However, our current policies do not address liaisons. At other times, policies have, but as policies have been revised, that no longer was the case. And as we talked about the liaison positions, we talked about how we utilize them and how those are assigned and what our responsibilities as liaisons are, what staff responsibilities around liaison positions may be. We decided that we needed to codify that and get mention of the liaison positions into our policies so that it is codified and it is laid out in our policies regarding our intention around liaisons. So what you have before you tonight, policy 0142.3, the orientation policy, that one does add the roles and responsibilities of board liaisons that I mentioned, and also gave us a chance to clean up that policy a little bit and remove wording such as board policy manual and change that to access to board docs. So we were able to tweak that policy and clean that up and modernize that a bit at the same time that we added the language that we wanted to around board liaisons. The board staff communications also grew out of that same discussion. And as you see in that particular draft policy, we were trying to clarify a little bit around those communication opportunities that we all have with staff members, how that does operate. And that came up, obviously, as we talked about liaison positions. How are staff supposed to communicate with us through those positions? What is the role of the superintendent in communicating? How does that go forward? So this is a policy that, while it wasn't totally about liaisons, you see that Venn diagram of liaisons and other communication aspects of policy that are so important to work together. So this language came about because of that. We also have some information regarding board liaison roles and responsibilities, when those are appointed, how those will operate, and that information will be provided to every incoming board member so that those incoming board members are up to speed and don't spend their first few months wondering what the heck we're even talking about when we talk about board liaisons. And that, I think this is an important thing for us to do for our own functioning as a board, to codify and clarify what we mean and what we do as regards liaison positions. Now, I did go through and make sure that this complements rather than conflicts with our other bylaws around our functions as a board and around any other functions that the liaison positions and our communication approaches would impact. So again, it's that Venn diagram where what we do here meshes well with what we do there, and that's the kind of policy environment you like to have. So I'd be happy to take any questions, or if there are any changes you'd like to suggest, now's the time.
Any questions, comment, or discussion?
Just thank you for doing the work as someone who's relatively new to the board. I think it'll be helpful for the next new people. So yeah, great.
That's the idea, yes. And Mark Hershiser and Jennifer Ferris, our resident policy gurus, they help with this as well and make sure that we're on straight and narrow.
Okay, thank you thank you for that work and the team that worked along with you. Continuing with our agenda, agenda item 13, standing business. Agenda item 13.01, a resolution authorizing 2021-2022 membership in the Ohio High School Athletic Association. May I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Reeves Would you like to share with us about this?
Yep, thank you, President Bell, Vice President Nestor Baker, Dr. Kellogg, members of the board. This is just our annual resolution that affirms the membership of our 4 middle schools and 3 high schools in the Ohio High School Athletic Association, which allows them to participate in the state tournaments. We agree to abide by their bylaws and affords us catastrophic insurance through the OHSA. So it's pretty much an annual formality, and as we've celebrated at many, many board meetings, a lot of our students do very, very well in our OHSA tournament, as we have celebrated many state champions through. So it's my recommendation that we continue our membership with the OHSA.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Reeves or any further discussion? Okay. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. That motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 13.02, resolution approving the loose furnishings package at Amherst Elementary School. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Dorn, would you like to share with us about this, please?
Yes, good evening, President Bell, Vice President Dr. Nestor Baker, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, and Ms. Marshall. The loose furnishings package refers to the replacement of furniture per the recommendations identified in the Building Condition Assessment Report from both the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission and from Triad Architects. The scope of work includes replacing most of the furniture for the office area, classrooms, the media center, the cafe, lounge areas, and storage areas. Bids were solicited in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code on March 15th. We received 2 bids that were publicly read on April 27th. The lowest responsible bid was submitted by Educational Furniture in the amount of $396,315. This includes all of the alternates. Educational Furniture's bid is approximately 8% under Triad's estimate of $430,000. It is being recommended that the board accept Educational Furniture's bid in the amount of $396,315.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Dorn or any further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. That motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 14.01, general public comments. We have not received any public comments. So moving on to agenda item 15.01, board comments. Who would like to start us off this evening? We'll start with you, Mr. Velardo. Any board comments?
Welcome to Mr. McElroy. Hope I didn't put him on the spot by saying, we just wanted to hear from him before we voted. No, I'm very excited to have him here in that position. Really just affirming what Cynthia and Sherry did as well. And again, just really honored to be a part of that group for this year. I happened to be working in the budget area with Ms. Marshall and Dr. Kellogg, and we've come to the conclusion that that is a critical area because it will not happen without the equitable distribution of funds. And so really that's just a bedrock thing. That's it. I almost called you Dr. Bell. Sorry, Reverend Bell. That's what I'd like to share today.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Altman.
Well, what kind of alphabetical order is that? It's going to be last. And then back to second grade or something. No, thank you. Again, I'm excited too about Mr. McElroy joining us. I'm like, how did we get someone with such great credentials? But it's because we're Westerville, right? No. really thrilled to have him here. You know, I already got to thank everyone who's doing all the equity work, but just to second that, it is really hard to find your way and work like that is not defined for you. You have to figure out how to do it in your particular space and time. So thanks for everybody who's contributing to the discernment on the front end about that work. And finally, I'm just going to say, teachers, students, like, just hang on, like you're almost there, right? And I know for some of them, they're real excited. I got 2 high schoolers who are pretty excited and an elementary schooler who's very sad right now. But we're almost at the end of this year, and just thanks everybody for continuing the hard work through the end.
Thank you. Ms. Davidson.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Cynthia and Sherry very much for all their hard work. This year, I'm trying to sit back and just listen and learn along with everyone else. If I do have questions, I definitely will ask. I really am trying to just soak everything in right now. So thank you for all of that. To Mr. McElroy, welcome. We're excited to have you. Can't wait to meet you in person someday. Hopefully that will be soon. And that's it. Yeah, for the rest of the year, you know, hold on, we're almost there. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Nestor Baker.
I figured it had to be me. Yeah, I'm the last one here. Also, I want to welcome Mr. McElroy. And yeah, of course he came here because this is Westerville and we have such incredible people. We heard from Cynthia and Sherry this evening. We welcome Mr. McElroy. I was thinking about the spring galas that happened this weekend and the wonderful, wonderful settings that were created for our students so they could have something approximating prom and give them the chance for that Seminole High School experience that goes on. It's where you belong. Westerville City Schools. It is where we belong, and it's where these remarkable people doing such incredible work on the behalf of so many other people. It's where they all belong as well. So it's a good evening. I don't know if that's because we are getting close to the end of this remarkable school year, but there is just much good happening here as we wrap up this particular school year. So hang on, we're almost there, and good things are going on every day right now.
Okay, thank you. I too would like to recognize and thank all of the staff and all of the volunteers, everybody that contributed to the spring galas that took place this past weekend. Dr. Kellogg sent us some pictures. It looked like a wonderful time was had by all. And so we are so very pleased that we were able to do something, not the traditional prom, but we're so glad that we were able to do something to celebrate this milestone for our students and the Westerville learning community. Also, again, welcome, Mr. McElroy. Let me throw my 2 cents in as well. Welcome you to the district. Look forward to meeting you as well and working together. Want to thank Ms. Chafin and Ms. DeVise for all of your hard work. Look forward to continuing to partner and to work together as we move forward in this in the diversity and inclusion and equity work. Just looking forward to continuing to do the great things that we do here in Westerville. So to make Westerville City Schools the place where everyone belongs. And so thank you. With that, we will move on to agenda item 16.01, dates, times, and locations of the next board meeting. The board will meet for a virtual regular session on Monday, May the 24th, 2021, 6:00 p.m. here at the Early Learning Center located at 936 East Wind Drive in Westerville. Agenda item 17.01, executive session. May I have a motion and a second for the board to go into executive session for the purpose of preparing for, conducting, or reviewing negotiations with employees regarding their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. May I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velarde,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes. And at this time, we will move into executive session and come back here to adjourn. Okay, we are returning from executive session. Continuing with our agenda. The next item on the agenda is item 18.01, and it is for adjournment. May I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes?
Mr. Bell.
Yes. And we are adjourned.
8:18.